Hey everyone, Nathan Rose here with another chess book review. And this time it's the turn of this book right here, The Complete Chess Swindler by Grandmaster David Smerdon. So the first thing I have to say is what a cool cover design. As an author myself, I appreciate a great cover image more than most, but this one, with the fox being a sneaky, crafty animal, and he's even wearing a little burglar's mask there, right? To represent the points that he's stealing away from his opponents in chess. I think it's really one of the best chess book cover designs that I've ever seen. So thumbs up there. And I also learned, through reading this book, the origin of the word swindle. So it actually began with the American player Frank Marshall, who was active in the early part of the 20th century. There are some chess openings with Marshall's name, and also the Marshall Chess Club in the United States was named after him. But it used to be called a Marshall swindle when this situation arose, right? Where someone has a hopeless position and somehow comes back to snatch a draw or even a win. So Frank Marshall had a particular reputation for that, and it used to be known as a Marshall swindle. And then over time, it got shortened to just swindle. So anyway, let's move on to the book itself. We all know players who seem to get lucky, right? Who seem to get into losing positions, but somehow manage to claw their way to an unlikely result. And I want to read from the back of the book here, because it's, I think, very important. It says that swindling is not about luck. It's a skill that can be trained. So sometimes when we've got a winning position, our opponent does get lucky because we just throw the game away with a blunder or through our own carelessness. But sometimes our opponent helps us on our way, right? Like they are actively laying traps, giving us a chance to go wrong, using chess psychology, which this book talks a lot about. And there's a difference, right? There's a difference between a swindle where your opponent has helped you go wrong and one where you really just throw it away all on your own. So this book is about helping our opponents make mistakes when they're in winning positions. And I really like how the book is structured. It talks a lot about psychology, as I said, and chess psychology is not really talked about very much these days because, well, we have computers and we are obsessive about finding the best move, as the computer says what the best move is. So it's all about accuracy, right? Like how close can we be to playing like a machine? But I mentioned in one of my other videos that chess is a game played between two human minds. So psychology is absolutely fundamental to how that contest plays out. So the way the book is structured is he starts out by laying out the mindset of the swindler, so the person who's trying to cause their opponent to make a mistake in a winning position. And he comes up with two key traits: grit, which is, I suppose, something a lot along the lines of perseverance, just not giving in. And the other thing is optimism. So having a positive mindset, even when the game seems to be going disastrously, to keep looking, keep hoping, don't throw in the towel. That's what optimism is. And okay, we can look at these two things and say, okay, try hard, hate losing, and yeah, try and play on when things seem bad, but what is it more concretely? So then he goes into the 4 psychological biases of our opponent that we can exploit. And these are impatience, hubris, fear, and a word which comes from the German language, Kontrollzwang. So Kontrollzwang means a desire to keep control at all costs, right? Like to not let the position get crazy and just keep things tightly under wraps. And then, once it's laid out these 4 psychological biases which we may be able to exploit, and give some ways that we can identify that in our opponent, and sometimes, of course, our opponent can be feeling several of these things all at once. They could be impatient and fearful, for example. Then it gives techniques to exploit each. So if you get the sense that your opponent is impatient, he comes up with a technique called the Trojan Horse. Right? So if your opponent wants the game to finish quickly, he's like, this needs to be done with. I want to finish the game and just claim this win and move on, sign the score sheets and head to the bar. If he's feeling that way, if he's feeling impatient, then a Trojan horse can be a great way to exploit that. And what he means by that is you offer your opponent a seeming shortcut to victory, but it has a trap in it. So if your opponent is feeling impatient, it's very likely that they might take that shortcut to victory, which you've gift wrapped for him on a silver platter, and fall into the trap that you've laid. And then it does this for all 4 of those psychological biases. So for hubris, he has something called the decoy trap. The decoy trap being you play a move which looks like it has an obvious threat, but there's a more sinister hidden threat underneath. So when your opponent sees the decoy, right, the more obvious move, which wasn't really the point of what you were doing, he'll ascribe that as the reason that you played your last move, and then miss the point, the larger point of the real trap that you've laid. And then for fear, he has the berserk attack, fairly self-explanatory. If your opponent is showing signs of fear, then you can throw everything at your opponent's king, just in a madman's dash to try and crush them with chaos, particularly effective if your opponent is running short on time. And then Kontrollsvang, like an opponent who's really trying to keep tight control of their winning position, he has something called window ledging, which is quite fun. It actually comes from the movies, where there's a very common motif in action movies where there'll be perhaps a sword fight going on between 2 soldiers or 2 pirates, and there'll be a stronger swordsman who seems to be winning the battle, but then the weaker swordsman will jump onto a window ledge. I mean, it's hard to recall a specific example of this, but if you think in movies, this kind of thing happens, right? They'll be fighting, and then the one who's losing jumps onto a window ledge and says, okay, I might have been losing, but if you want to continue this fight, you're going to have to go into a precarious situation too. And then that's how the weaker swordsman turns it around and ends up beating his stronger opponent. So he likes his colourful names, does Grandmaster David Smurden. And it really helps to remember the different techniques that he talks about. So 2 psychological traits that we want to engender in ourselves, grit and optimism, and then 4 psychological biases that we can look to exploit in our opponents: impatience, hubris, fear, and Kontrollsvang. And then the final part of the book, he goes more into technique, like some of the common motifs that swindlers can use when they're trying to, as he says in the subtitle, save points from lost positions. So that goes into things like fortresses, stalemate, perpetual check, that kind of thing, and it gives examples of each. And he's a very entertaining writer too, like just the way that he writes, it's quite engaging, and you can't say that about most chess authors, if we're being honest, who are often quite dry. But I mean, the subject matter, coming back from a losing position and springing a surprise on an unwary opponent, it does lend itself, I think, to being an interesting and fun read, but a very practical and useful one as well. Look, I can't recommend this book highly enough. It's fantastic for entertainment value, for practical value, for mindset value. And then the games he's chosen as well are just fun to go through, play through, and see how very strong players, grandmasters, even world champions, can fall into swindles, because after all, they're only human. So that's the review. I hope you'll check the book out, and I hope you will be able to save some points from lost positions after you've gone through the book and learned the material.